All right, so we've reached almost the end of Food Loves Tech. Thank you all for hanging tight with us, and we have a really delicious panel actually to close us out. I hope you've been able to try a lot of these products over in the expo hall. I just want to make one more plug. Maybe you've already heard me say this before. If you've enjoyed the conversations you've heard in this area at Food Loves Tech, at Edible Brooklyn, we launched a podcast this weekend called In the Field with Edible Brooklyn that takes a look at where food and technology meet. So wherever you listen to your podcasts, look it up. And I'm just going to hand it over to Mandy. But thank you all for coming to Food Loves Tech and hanging tight. Off to you, Mandy.
Hi, I am Mandy Neglich. I'm the social media editor for Edible Brooklyn and Edible Manhattan. So I hope you've been hashtagging up Food Loves Tech this whole weekend and we've been interacting with you. We're about to close out the day on drinks, which I know we all like to talk about around happy hour on a Saturday. So thanks so much for being here with us. I'm here with Keli Rivers from Sipsmith Gin, Eboni Major from Bulleit Bourbon, Stewart, and Mike Messersmith from Oatly. He's the U.S. General Manager. Cohen, she's the co-founder of Dripkit. Then we're down here to Stewart, who's from Belvedere Vodka, the national brand ambassador. And then finally, Bystryn, founder of Cider and Love. So we're going to get started talking about kind of what all of our industries are doing, the future of each of our products. And I wanted to start off with ingredients. I come from the beer world, and I'm sure we all saw about beer might be expensive in the future because global warming is really affecting barley output, and that's a huge challenge for us in sourcing and figuring out how to get that barley output up and less expensive and what we're going to do in the future. And I know that a lot of you are facing similar things. Brian, you had talked about the way that rye is harvested now and is affected by global warming, if you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing as we kind of take a look at weather and those types of climates that affect us and how our farmers grow our rye in Poland. They've had to push back or move up depending on where they are when they harvest the rye. So it's been something that we closely monitor, and we always rely on our farmers to give us the best information because they know better than anyone else. They're very in tune with the land, and we have a very good partnership with the Lotz Institute, which is a agricultural institute in Poland, and we make sure that our farmers have any type of knowledge that they're going to need, because while it is something that their fathers and mothers have been doing for a very long time, we understand that technology is playing a big part, maybe not in the grassroots of how we harvest things, but it's important to, if you have this information, why not use it?
Yeah, and Eboni, I know you guys are doing some innovative stuff as far as sourcing at Bulleit.
Yeah, so for Bulleit Bourbon, we have recently changed our corn sourcing. About 3 years ago, we went to all non-GMO corn. And what makes Bulleit special among other bourbons is also our rye. So we are very particular about our scheduling for our sourcing and our rye and where we get our rye from, because different to your other bourbons on the shelf, Bulleit has that spicy level, and you get that from the rye. Most recently, we've changed our sourcing just from a county-wide farmers to we bought about 300 acres behind the distillery, and we're growing our own corn just so that in the future we're able to better detect what's going on with our crops and making sure that our raw ingredients are very close to us.
Cool, and when will that be available, that corn?
So we actually start distilling with that corn next week. So I'm really excited to see that. It'll go in a barrel next week, and then in about 4 to 6 years, you will start seeing some.
All right, so breaking news.
4 to 6
4
years.
to 6 years, yeah. And Annie, you're in a unique situation like that. A lot of your cider makers are actually their own producers of their crop as well.
Yeah, I think the reason... I think it's on now. Okay, good. We're in an unusual situation. Cider is a very big category. There's lots of different ciders out there, which you may not even be aware of. We at Cider and Love specifically focus on heritage cider, which means that the fruit is fundamentally different from what you brought to school in a lunchbox. A lot of them are going to be cider-specific apples, heirloom apples, which if you ate, you would spit out. You didn't know maybe that apples could do that, but they do. As a result, they're very hard to source. And most of the guys that we work like the Etsy of cider. You buy with us, but really you're buying directly from a maker, small, independent, and it ships from the orchard to your door. For them, there really has been very limited commercial development of what they need. So they're growing it themselves biodynamically, sustainably, organically. The good news for us is that with the upsurge in interest in cider, more commercial growers are getting interested. There's more data, which allows people to make the investment in apple growing, which is a long-term investment because it takes 5 years to grow that apple. So we're in a sort of upsurge in terms of what that ingredient's doing, but we have the same commonality across the panel. You're looking for very specific, hard-to-find ingredients, which the consumer is looking for.
Speaking of that, Mike, you guys really came into the category of oat drink.
Yeah, that didn't really, no, I had never had an oat drink or oat milk a few years ago. And I think it's an interesting conversation when you think about the future of beverages. And you're talking about, some of the impacts of climate change or technology. It's like mitigation strategies almost, rather than, I would say, especially if you're thinking about starting a company, how do you pick an ingredient that actually may be part of solving some of those issues? So with Oatly, we started making products only out of oats over 25 years ago in Sweden because our scientist founder said, well, dairy, a lot of people can't process dairy. He was a part of that initial research. And, then looking at the impact on climate change of lots of other source ingredients. And it's dark 18 hours a day in Sweden. They couldn't grow an almond if they tried. And so we only do oats. And especially if you're reading the news now on UN climate reports and how helpless people feel, I think both in businesses and on a personal level about what do I do about this? And really one of the consensus views is, well, you need to start shifting to a more plant-based diet. And people, I think, whether it's on a consumer level, looking at businesses, and certainly the impetus on founders and on companies is to think about the impact that the choices they make with their core ingredients has on the environment, both from part of it's just a practical availability sourcing perspective, because I wouldn't want to start a business knowing that in 10 years, my core ingredient is going to be affected by, rising oceans and, terrible climate change impacts. So I think, that was from the beginning what we've tried to do at Oatly. I would just say when you think forward about the future of beverages, I think you're going to both see consumers demanding it, and I think entrepreneurs are going to prize looking at crops that both help address the issue as well as being less affected by some of those impacts.
How has sourcing been for you in the United States, coming from Sweden?
So that's actually, with the legacy of oats, I don't know, I had oatmeal when I was 5. You think that they grow so easily, but actually most farmers don't grow oats in the United States anymore. Basically from the time that they stopped using horses to take their crops to market and a truck came or a train came instead, they stopped growing oats because they didn't need to give the oats to the horse. And so I would love nothing more, especially being a pro-agriculture, pro-farm, we are decidedly a pro-farmer company. I would love to be buying oats from Illinois and Indiana and Nebraska and Kansas, but most of the farmers there don't grow them. They grow lots of corn, they grow lots of soy, and it would actually be better for their soil if they did grow cover crops like oats and barley and things like that. So we source 90+% of our oats from Western Canada, and we're doing some partnership work right now to try to create some partnership and academic research into showing Midwestern American farmers the opportunity of going back to growing oats, food-grade oats for American consumers. So we're super excited about that, but it's one of the crazy things that a crop that's relatively simple, but it just does, market forces and government kind of choices have basically eliminated the American oat crop, and we'd like to change that.
And Kara, you're not really sourcing from the United States, but there has been a boom in specialty coffee that we were talking about. And so how's sourcing for you guys?
Yeah, so sourcing is great for us right now because there's such a plethora of amazing coffee options. right now, and I think the boom that's happened in specialty coffee over the last 20 years has really, in the specialty coffee industry, which I wasn't part of until a couple years ago, has been instrumental in supporting like small farmers and cooperatives, and the whole industry has been really, really pro-farmer for the last 20 years, which is great because we're having all of these great coffees coming out of Colombia, Guatemala, all over Central South America, Africa, Indonesia, and you have these cooperatives of farmers working together to create the best possible coffee, versus in the past it was more about creating the most possible coffee. And because growing coffee is so delicate, it probably sounds like the opposite of growing oats. Everything, you have to have a very specific temperature, very specific weather, very specific altitudes to grow the taste that people are enjoying. It's so much more of that now that there's a demand for it.
And are you finding consumers know what they're looking for in a coffee, or they know where it's coming from, or they want to?
So I'm finding that consumers know what they like, but they don't know where it comes from or what it is. So interesting thing that's happening in the coffee market right now is that specialty coffee has kind of tipped the scale over to mass consumer. And so now 55% of coffee sold in the US is considered specialty, whereas 20 years ago, I think it was closer to like 15%. And people know that they like the taste of high-end coffee, but we're starting to learn as we get out there and sell more and more and get out into more mass market sales versus industry, that people don't necessarily know the difference between a light roast and a dark roast, or they don't understand that a Central or South American coffee is gonna taste pretty different from an African coffee, which is gonna be a lot more fruity, complex, and tea-like versus kind of that nutty, chocolatey type of coffee that you might be used to. So one of the things that we're trying to do at Dripkit is just making specialty coffee more accessible and focusing more on education in words and terms that people understand, so that they will know what they want.
And Kelly, to that end about gin, we were talking about how now gin, there's flavored gins, there's gins that are made from juniper and not, and how are you educating your consumers?
Hello? Okay, sorry. So basically, Sipsmith is the first gin to be made in London in almost 200 years, which is kind of mind-blowing. That's like saying cognac not being made in cognac, or Parmesan not being made in Parmesan. But there was a law that was put in place in 1757 that regulated it. So all those gin distilleries and distilleries in general went up to Scotland and Ireland. That's why there's no English whiskeys. But what happens now with this boom of gin, and not only in the US, it's a $2 billion industry in the UK alone right now. And then you have Spain and Australia, and South Africa's got some amazing gins coming out of it. But everybody is doing this innovation, which is really exciting, because all the people that didn't think they liked gin now have options. And juniper has to be in it, but that's all that has to be in it. And it doesn't even tell you how much or how little juniper, and it can be made from anything. And so what happens is, with all these different styles, the consumer, what we're having a hard time is, they go into the liquor store and they see, or the bar, and they see all these bottles, and there's no rhyme or reason. So you go by price, or you go by bottle shape and color and label. And so trying to find a constant language with people, and it's gotten so bad. I mean, right now there's like 1,500 different labels coming out of the city of London. And so how do you do this? And so a lot of the older distilleries that are around there are trying to regulate what gin is. Let's define what it is. Let's have a amount of juniper it needs to have, or citrus, which for me personally, and how I educate and how Sipsmith educates, we don't want that. We don't want to stifle creativity. We don't want to tell people, don't make it this way, because the more people that come to the gin table and try it, even if it is a flavored gin or an aged gin, or maybe a one that isn't necessarily technically what we consider a gin, at least they're trying, and at least they're coming. And then we can take education and say, okay, well, now you've done this, how about we go here with it? Or how about we go here with it? And we've opened up your mind to understand a little bit more about how great the spirit can be.
What about the rest of you guys? Do you see your categories expanding in the future, or are you seeing things being defined and walls being drawn?
Yeah, I mean, particularly in the vodka category, I mean, it's something where people think that the most premium vodkas are odorless and tasteless. And that is beyond from the truth. I mean, every vodka has a flavor, even the ones that are on the really low shelf that you might have had in college with a really weird label on it. It has a flavor. It might not be a good flavor, but it has a flavor. But in our category particularly, Belvedere has always tried to innovate. We've never tried to stifle. We've never tried to go into the political bad-mouthing of other companies. It just doesn't work for us. And with our two new expressions of vodka, we are putting breath into a category that desperately needs it. We have two new bottles that are entirely inspired by terroir. And when we started this conversation, there was a lot of people who were saying, well, one, terroir and distilled spirits. I mean, this is like 10 years ago. Like that's impossible. It was all the sommeliers. That's all they could talk about. And then Runga Agricole was kind of like, well, wait a minute. And then, of course, our friends at Hennessy were like, all our eau de vies are completely different. We have to blend them to make the one spirit. And it was very clear that this was a conversation. But even those advocates, once they heard that we were trying to put terroir into an odorless, tasteless category, they went, whoa, this could be tough. But we've done it. We've done it. And there's 310 miles between our two farmers that grow these two bottles. And the process in which we do it is identical. The strain of rye that we use is identical. The yeast that we use to ferment, identical. The way that we distill it, it's all the same. But the vodkas are way different. One has more of a menthol flavor, where the other one has more of a salted caramel flavor. So I think it was important, and we're hoping that, again, not trying to follow trends, but we're hoping that the category will be viewed upon as more of, that of whiskeys and gins, of this isn't odorless and tasteless, and I should get to know the things that I like about my vodka, and then so that hopefully the consumer will be better educated in kind of ordering a drink, as opposed to, well, this is what I saw in a commercial and I should probably get it.
I think for Bulleit Bourbon, bourbons are heavily regulated. There are three main rules. It has to be distilled and barreled at a certain proof. It has to go into a certain type of barrel. And it also has to have a certain percentage of corn for that mash bill. And so where we've decided to be innovative is in our different mash bills. My title is a whiskey blender, so what I do is pretty much own the liquid from the time it comes off the still to the time it goes in the bottle. And that's what's different about Bulleit Bourbon. There's a step between that time that liquid comes out of the barrel before it goes into the bottle, and I am able to use just basically, people ask me what I get paid to do, and I get paid to smell whiskey. So I am creating formulas based on my smell and taste, and so we've done a lot of different innovative things, but we are also, unlike gin, we are very heavily regulated in what we can do. But
it's a very fine line between the science and the art.
Yeah.
Anybody can distill, but what you do with it afterwards, I think that's the important part.
Yeah.
Just going back to the original question in terms of expansion, I think across probably all of our categories, fragmentation is your friend. We're looking at a world where across food, beverage, beyond, there's this concept that we want to be more deliberate, more meaningful with our choices, right? Probably, I know at least for myself, and I'm looking out into this audience thinking, I'm guessing it's true for you guys too, where I am now versus 10 years ago, I care a lot more. About what I'm wearing, what I'm putting on myself, and particularly when you're dealing with food and beverage and drink. And I think we've seen it so much in salad bars already. It's been around for 10, 15 years, but it's coming now into the world of beverage, and people really care. You want to understand. And so that suddenly there's all this opportunity outside mass plays. Where people really want to resonate with what is that producer's story? Is that really some sort of esoteric ingredient, or is that incredible craftsmanship? Some of our makers, I love the surprise and delight of some of this. Do you know that some heritage ciders are aged for 2 years? Some of them are made in the method champenoise, like a champagne, but the French will never let you call it champagne, those bastards. But, there's all of this unique quality. If you want to go after, something very specific, I bet everybody up here has something for you. And so to me, that's a huge amount of growth, because people aren't just buying the same thing. You can fall in love with cider. Obviously, that's why we named it Cider in Love. But you can fall in love with gin and with vodka and with, all things oat. And I think that that's just one of the pleasures of consumer life today. And I think it bodes well for all of us.
Yeah, and this panel is about what we will be drinking in the future. So we're listening to our consumers about sourcing and thinking about our farmers. How much has Instagram culture impacted you guys? I don't know if you saw glitter beer blow up, but
oh my God. I mean, I'm just going to speak now with my old hat on. I spent over a dozen years in the beauty industry for my sins. Yeah, right. And unicorn was a big thing. None of you are cool, like you're too cool. You wouldn't have known this, but like this was like a thing. And then Starbucks came out with that unicorn beverage, which just struck me as what that was a beauty Instagram thing. Like you can go look at it later. It's like a vice. Like go look up unicorn makeup. It's terrifying, but it's real. And it jumped the barrier into beverage. And likewise, the rosé thing, totally Instagram. You know, rosé all day. As if you drank rosé all day, you wouldn't be flat on your face. But if you drink rosé all day, that then moves into other categories and millennial pink and all of these things. And that's all Instagram driven, including education.
Well, I mean, talking about unicorn, the number one gin liqueur, which is anything below 40%, doesn't necessarily have sugar, is called Unicorn Tears.
Oh,
and
no.
they just released a new one, which is the black Unicorn Tears. So now it's black gin with glitter in it. And at Sipsmith, we did
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. It's gin. But at Sipsmith, we have, Instagram, because you have to. I'm too old, I don't understand it so well. But we, for kind of shits and giggles, when the Great Bake Show, I think 3 years ago, was debuting, our head distiller, because we have a very small still that we get to do fun things on that we never release, decided to put a lemon drizzle cake. So if you don't know what this is, it's like a pound cake that you soak lemon juice and like a frosting. We threw it in the still and we distilled it because, we can and you should, right? It's fun. So we distilled it and what came off of it was pretty good. Whoever had to clean the still, we basically did the short straw. But we Instagrammed it, and within 4 hours, we got over 1 million people clicking on it. And M&S, Martin Spencer, which is the biggest grocery store chain in the UK, called us up and said, we'll take 3 pallets. And we're like, no, this was a joke. And they're like, no, we'll take 3 pallets. So we made 3 pallets for them, and they sold it over 2 days, all 3 pallets. It's now something that we do regularly, and unfortunately, it's one of the things when I talk about Sipsmith, everyone's like, when's the cake one coming? When's the lemon drizzle coming? And I'm like, it's not. It's kind of a joke. And then, of course, our marketing thing is like, so it's coming in March. So in March of 2019, you're going to be able to enjoy your lemon drizzle Sipsmith.
Do you think that's something people are starting to see through and get away from, or do you think we still have a couple years of runway? Kara, I see that you're wanting to chime in.
Oh, no, I was just thinking Instagram's been really beneficial for us. Less from a novelty perspective, but just because our product is completely new to the market. And so it's a portable pour-over packet. It has the brewer, the filter, and the coffee all in one. And so Instagram's been really helpful for us because it's been a way for us, one, to collect data on how people are using our product. People are posting stories all the time of them using the product in different situations. It also allows us to educate a lot about the product and also about coffee because Instagram, especially as Instagram gets more and more advanced, being able to use stories and polls and photos and every other part of Instagram that exists now, it's really allowed us to improve our product much more rapidly than if we had been going through traditional retail routes because we're getting instant feedback on the product and we're getting instant insights on how people are using it, how they're sharing it, and what about it is interesting to them.
I think I use Instagram in a different route than everybody else. For me, it's more of my education. I'm able to go and see exactly what my consumers are looking for, how they're posting, how they're drinking our bourbon, and also as competitors, and that allows me, because most times I'm sitting within my lab, I don't get in the market much, but it allows me to translate that back to our science research team and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, let's try this. And so Instagram has been very valuable to me in my job for that, for my own education.
Yeah, I think Instagram. I mean, you have to love it. You have to love it if you're a business. I mean, it's one of those things where yes, you're collecting data. Yes, you have the ability to give people education. I mean, but for me, it's a great way to stay connected and to find new things. I mean, it's like liquid is kind of almost like the new vinyl, right? Like everyone's so excited to find out about that niche coffee that they want to tell other friends about, or a particular bottle that has a lemon drizzle cake. But I mean, it's also a way that I keep in tide with the bartending community. I don't bartend anymore, but I did for 10 years, and the bartending community is huge because these are our tastemakers. These are the people, we can say whatever we want about our product and how it should be served, but until it gets in their hands, they're going to be the ones to decide how it's being served to people. So for that, I really tie into popular bartenders or people that I've met in Cleveland just to see what they're doing, to check in, because while I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life to making sure that I know everything about spirits, I don't know it all. And it's a great place for me to teach, but also to learn.
Yeah, speaking of the bartenders, how much are you guys kind of working on educating industry versus educating your consumer?
I mean, that is my job. My job is I'm in charge of the U.S. to educate bartenders and do cocktail development, and I go around the country, all 50 states, and I teach bartenders about our vodka, and it's incredibly important because, like I said, they are our first customers. They are the ones who are going to decide whether or not they want to push our product. They are unpaid ambassadors, as I like to talk about. And so, but if I'm not going around and teaching them about our bottle, about the two new single estates that are Belvedere, they're two bottles. They're beautiful. One's this light blue, the other one's this dark charcoal gray, and they're gorgeous and they're beautiful. There's some back over there on that bar. But if you don't know anything about them, they're two bottles on a back bar, and they're just going to sit there. So educating bartenders is incredibly important to us.
And Mike, you kind of walk a line between consumer and business as well, as far as who's buying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was, it's actually like, not spirits, but oat milk is just it's like a quite boring product, but we really focus a ton on the barista community and coffee shops because, and it was the first time I tried it's the biggest actually pitfall most startup food and beverage companies I think fall into is like, how am I ever gonna get anyone to try this thing? And the idea of us like pouring samples for people at like Penn Station or like you just like here's a cup of oat milk as you rush past me. It sounds like the worst experience ever. I would hate that. And so what we did instead was, we started our company in the United States with one item and one channel, which was our Barista Edition oat milk and coffee. And we got really smart people who came from coffee and we didn't try to sell. We just went in and, steamed oat milk and showed them the benefits. And ultimately baristas, I would imagine like bartenders, are trying to deliver the best product for their regular consumers. And it is 100% a meritocracy in many cases with that. And so when our product foamed better and it accentuated the roast and the preparation of the coffee, it won in many cases. And by really leaning in on the barista community and that specialty coffee trial moment, experiencing something like Oatly through a amazing cappuccino prepared at your local favorite coffee shop was a infinitely better experience than us paying some advertising agency to like sample this product at a trade station. And so that trying to like architect that first consumer experience and how you equip those people to speak about your product and why it's interesting or good is one of the most important things I think you really need to work through when you're starting a new company.
We have a saying, Bulleit built by bartenders, and it is absolutely true. In the past year, I spent a lot of my time going out to some of our bigger markets, particularly San Francisco, to be able to educate the bartenders about what it is that I do and how it is made. Because as they're selling our product and feeding our consumers on a daily basis, they don't have the time or the ability to make a 2-day trip to Louisville, Kentucky, and visit the distillery. But I go and I give them a view into my life. I task them with creating Bulleit themselves, and the response that I get from them is very grateful. They're absolutely thankful for that knowledge to be able to translate that behind the bar, and that's what keeps people drinking Bulleit.
Nobody wants to be wrong. They want to be in the know. That's why they look to Instagram. That's why they look to people that they see on TV and they emulate. That's what the marketing company is all about. Patron and Oprah Winfrey, as soon as she said it was her favorite tequila, their sales went up, and we don't have the juice. We don't have the agaves to have the juice, and now they're scrambling to find. But the thing about bartenders and baristas and your people at your local natural wine and beer stores are the fact that they know something that you want to know, because you want to go back to your friends and say, hey, did you know this thing? Like, this is totally cool. I'm cooler than you. And then you spread it around. Otherwise, it's just a pretty package or a bottle on the back bar, and you don't care. Before, somebody would ask you for a gin and tonic. They'll just take a gin and tonic. Now it's like, well, what's your well? No, I don't want that.
I'll play contrarian on the panel. Cider has unique challenges. We don't have baristas. That's not really where you're going to learn about cider. And then there's your local bottle shop, and there's beer, and there's wine, and they're the big boys, and they've been sitting at the table for a long time. And cider deserves a seat at the table that is unique and individual. It's America's original sip. We were all drinking it all the time for 150 years, and we've just forgotten. And in that case, influencers are important. Your barista, if you can have, the right restaurants, I'm going to give a shout out to Jen Smith, who's the head of the New York Cider Association, who's right there. Hello, Jen. And Jen spends a huge amount of time working that influencer piece, introducing chefs, making sure that the food and the restaurant community, have the right ciders and can help educate the consumer. But really, my feeling is you got to go straight to the consumer. Yes, it's on the menu at 11 Madison Park, but how many of us are eating at 11 Madison Park all the time? How often are you actually going to be able to get in front of, a licensed cider professional, which exists now? And in that case, Instagram and that democracy of DTC allows people to break in a way and understand themselves. Because for me, a lot of my research and a lot of what I'm interested in, I agree with you completely. I want to know more, but a lot of it's self-directed. I'm going to be interested in something. It's Cider Week. This year, it's, 50 plus events. It's growing, but like, what the heck is that all about? I mean, you're bored on the subway. You're going to do a quick Google search. Maybe you're going to play around on Instagram, and then hopefully I can tell my story visually and capture you. And then, there's a difference between pushing information out and pulling people into information. And I think for a category like cider, where you have a challenge with distributors who are going to be, you're bringing around your little sales education like suitcase, and you got X number of bottles of wine or X number of bottles of beer, how often are you going to have, one cider in there? And P.S., they really taste different. So how are you actually going to get a sense that cider could be smoky, or cider could be citrusy, or it can be really tannic, and P.S., like super dry. It's not melted Jolly Ranchers. And so how do you even learn that? We have a problem with the actual structure of the alcohol industry really not allowing that category to shine. If you already are in a category where it works, it's fantastic. But if not, you got to go, straight to the peeps.
Gotcha. I think we have time for one question. We've got the mic. It looks like, oh, no, Cider Week. Oh.
Just so everyone can hear would be nice.
It's building on what Annie said, and a lot of what's been said on the panel. We've heard about the importance of educating the gatekeepers, the trade, and we've heard about the effectiveness of Instagram. I wonder if anybody does have any thoughts about direct-to-consumer education besides Instagram. What's working? How are you getting the nuances of your category and your particular brand across to people?
Yeah, I'll go. So I think in a lot of innovation that's happening around talking to people and learning about talking directly to the consumer and learning about their lifestyle and addressing them and their needs. So it's like pretty standard lifestyle marketing 101, making it about the consumer. And I think that with direct-to-consumer beverage, it really is about showing them how your beverage fits into their life. And whether it's like their idea of the romance of their life, whether it's kind of like the intellectual drinking bourbon in a library, or maybe it's about just the active aspect of their life. So for us, we're trying to teach people that they can have a really good cup of coffee anywhere. And so when we do direct-to-consumer marketing, we're really talking about the experience of brewing a really good cup of coffee when you're in the outdoors, when you're at your office, or whether you are in a hotel or at the airport or wherever you are, and making it about the experience of their life and less about the ingredients. And I think the ingredients matter a lot. And I think creating a really good taste and having great ingredients matters a lot. But I do think in direct-to-consumer right now is a little bit more about showing them how your product fits into their lifestyle versus just talking about your product and how you made it.
Yeah, I just to kind of piggyback on that, I think it's particularly when you're speaking to the consumer, you have to read the room. Like, you have to kind of figure out what's going to be talked about and what's not going to be talked about, and simplifying it goes a long way. I was just across over here in this awesome setup that's going on over here and seeing all these great things, and I come across this machine, and there's this line down the way for this machine, and this machine has 5 bottles of liquor on top of it, and you push the iPad and it makes you a cocktail, and there it is, it's in your hand. How am I going to convince a consumer that they should put Belvedere into that machine? Other than all these simplified items that, oh, well, you know, we come from a Polish appellation, we're not allowed to add sugar to our vodka. That raises an eyebrow. People go, wait, what do you mean? Well, anywhere else in the world, you can have a 1-liter bottle of vodka and you can add up to 100 milliliters of glycerin, sugar, mellowing agents, whatever you want to the bottle, and you don't have to tell anybody about it. So I think when you just simplify something and you make it poignant to their life and it kind of clicks, it goes, oh, wow, this is something where the ingredients are outstanding, and it's also maybe something that appeals to me. So making it appeal to the consumer is everything, and just simplifying it and not going into, you know, distillation rates in our column stills and, you know, the time of migration of the deer going across Lake Bartajek. Like, just simplified.
Oh, okay. Well, these lovely people will be around if you guys have more questions. We'll be mingling through, and thank you guys so much for coming.